I am Jim Collison, and this is the Clifton Strengths Podcast Season 2, recorded on January 10th, 2023. In this Clifton Strengths podcast series, we'll look at the Clifton Strengths for Leaders report, one theme at a time, and today's theme is empathy. If you're listening live, we'd love to have you join us in chat. If you're listening after the fact, you can send your questions to us via email, coaching@gallup.com. Dr. Jaclynn Robinson is our host today. She works as a Gallup Learning and Development Consultant and has joined me for Season 1 of the Clifton Strengths podcast, where we looked at the Well-Being at Work book, and we looked at it one theme at a time as well. Jaclynn, always great to see you, and welcome back.
Thank you. Hello.
We are spending some time talking about empathy today. Let's dig in a little bit. Give us kind of that standard definition, so to speak. Maybe not so standard.
Yes. So if you have empathy, you can sense other people's feelings by imagining yourself in others' lives or situations.
And I love that idea of sensing in this. I think this is one of those where empathy really leads out in this ability to see it ahead of time in people, right? Sense it in people going forward with that. I think sometimes where we miss on that is on our own, folks with high empathy. Sometimes we're so tuned into other folks, we don't tune into ourselves. That's not what we're talking about today, but that's one of those areas I've seen sometimes with folks high in empathy, where they're not listening to themselves as well. So maybe those high empathy folks, you can let us know how that's going for you. We are talking about leadership, however. So when we think of the power of this theme in a leadership role, I think some folks see it as a drag, but I think it's super, super powerful. Talk a little bit about how it can, the power of this with leaders.
Yes. So a leader with empathy tends to have a pulse on the emotions of others and can be comfortable providing time and space for people to process their emotions, to process change, or any impactful event before providing next steps. So there's that pause to just process as opposed to moving straight ahead. And even with the next steps that they take, they'll likely be considering, hey, how do we create stability and how do we offer compassion to ground these individuals? So they've got people and their emotions top of mind, which I think is incredible.
Yeah, because I think sometimes we think we can completely remove emotions from the equation. Like, why are you getting so emotional about this? Well, we're humans, right? That happens.
It's us first.
Part of what makes us great. And so, it is part of that. I think in leadership, by the way, this is one of those areas I think in leadership that's the hardest. And so I think those who have high empathy in leadership roles, if I'm leading a team of leaders, I am going to look for my high empathy managers to say, you got to help me with this, right? You guys, that's one of those areas where as a leader of leaders, I might lean on those because I don't have it very high. How could this, so we talked about in leadership. So how could we use this theme to lead others then? Let's dig in a little bit on that one.
Well, because leaders with this theme sense the emotions of others, they can create a safe space for people to be honest and more vulnerable. And then through that honesty, whether it's a conversation or open feedback in an employee survey, so to speak, that leader's more capable of taking action or helping that individual or team or department to identify a solution. So it's not going to necessarily brew under the table. And in, world terms, that might just be, they're not going to ignore it, but they can actually bring it out and manage it. Once it's called out, people can do something about it.
Jaclynn, how important is the responsibility, knowing we're getting at core emotions of people, and for those of us who maybe have it high or don't and are getting these core emotions, how important is it to safeguard those emotions? I think, you're getting this raw feedback from people, and we think about it in the context of teams. How important is it to safeguard that feedback that we're getting?
So important.
In that way? Yeah. Talk a little bit about that.
Yes. Without that psychological safety in the room, that will start to just break down trust. And then if we go back to the 4 needs of followers, Without trust, how can you stabilize a group? How can they feel like you are compassionate towards them as a group? How can you offer hope? Trust is really that first step. And so I think it's so important to be safe with people's emotions whenever they come to you.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
probably quite a dance for those high with empathy to be able to manage those emotions and also try to move them from that period after they've processed them into action.
Yeah.
So that they and the individual that's coming to them don't sit in that space forever.
I think as a leader, this is one where if we get it wrong, it's very damaging. If
Mm-hmm.
we lose that trust, if we get that emotional feedback and then do whatever, fill in the blanks. We're going to talk about how that can hinder here in just a second, but that's one of those areas as a leader, when you lose it fast. And so I think it's just a
Yes.
warning on that. You have that power to draw it out as a young leader. As I think about young leaders and leadership, I think that's one of those areas to be very, very careful in. You've gotten
Mm-hmm.
privileged information, in some cases, very privileged. What you do with it matters. Like the next thing you do with it really, really
Mm-hmm.
matters, right? Let's talk a little bit about how this theme can hinder the leadership of others.
Ooh, wearing the emotions of the workplace on their shoulders without having an outlet or being able to process or rid them at the end of the day can probably very quickly lead someone with empathy to burnout. And because of that mental and emotional exhaustion that can take, it can be really hard to make decisions from a practical standpoint or to move forward with a challenging but necessary change for the workplace. So I think it is really going back to I think something you mentioned earlier, it just reminded me of well-being. But you had mentioned those with empathy, are able to empathize with others, but it might be harder to receive or manage their own feelings. So that's that well-being piece. How am I shedding the feelings of others off and, focusing on my own well-being?
Yeah, I think in traditional leadership circles, we've actually encouraged people to shed those thoughts of empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think for those of us who are high in empathy, and if we are finding ourselves in that kind of leadership team or a leadership role where that empathy is being squelched or being suppressed or not encouraged to be used, that can be an area where we might employ that on others, right? We may
Mm-hmm.
push that forward on others, and that would hinder us, I think, in some
Mm-hmm.
ways. Any other thoughts on that?
That's a great way of putting it. I would suggest anytime possible that someone high in empathy then have a coach or a mentor or someone they can talk to
Yeah. Yeah.
just to manage all of that.
I completely agree. It's an area because it's dealing with emotions, and that doesn't mean the others
Mm-hmm.
don't. But I think
Mm-hmm.
in particular, this one really deals with emotions,
Mm-hmm.
and this may be one of those areas leaders we need to really focus and get it right, and spend a little time a little more time thinking about it maybe than we do. This season, we're spending some time thinking about the Clifton Strengths for Leaders report, a brand new role-based report we have available. But we're also thinking about tying that together. We have two other role-based reports, Clifton Strengths for Sales and Clifton Strengths for Managers. Let's talk about this idea of report dynamics as we put those together.
Mm-hmm.
The Clifton Strengths for Leaders and the Clifton Strengths for Sales report with empathy, putting those two together. What do you see that combination of reports? How could we be successful with that?
I think this one's fun. So, this leader could empathize with the client they're working with or the products or services they sell to customers. And they'll have a sense of what the client or customer's needs are and can help create a solution for those needs. And since buying habits and brand loyalty are emotional more than
Yeah.
rational, this
Yeah.
is based on Daniel Kahneman's work, the behavioral economist. They're probably quite good at creating brand loyalty or client partnership as a result. So I think
Yeah.
they've got that. They've got a really cool superpower here.
Yeah, well, the art of advertising is done at the emotional level. You think you've seen
Yes.
these we have been doing I'm on the marketing team now, and we've been doing a retreat all week, and we spent some times looking at some successful ad campaigns, and one of them really tied to the emotions, right? A
Hmm.
little tear, I'm kind of tearing up thinking about it right now. Well, but that invokes those emotions. like I said earlier, I think from that perspective, from a sales perspective, invoking emotions just as a manipulative ploy, there's a fine line in there, right? Between marketing and manipulation. And so I think, again, we need to be responsible in that space, thinking about it. But I love that. I love that idea. Again, going back to solutions, we're selling solutions, and oftentimes solutions that can make emotions better could be a more viable solution for the customer. What about the Clifton Strengths for Leaders and Clifton Strengths for Managers report together? Report dynamics, TM. How would we put those two together?
A leader that manages people with this theme can be tuned into someone's emotional state in the workplace. So they might be, just looking at that person. Hey, are they engaged? Are they burned out? Something feels a little off. And as a result of that, they can support the well-being of direct reports and help celebrate this individual when something great happens, but also create the open psychological safe space for them to talk when something not so great happens. And they can broach that topic themselves because they're already picking up on it. So that gives them that opportunity to check in, feel like something's off here. I'm just going to see, hey, how are you today? Is everything okay? So I think they can take those preemptive measures and support well-being before it gets low.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love, just as a reminder, there's how to be successful in each of these role-based reports, how to be successful, what can hinder, and then some action items are available. We're just merely making some suggestions of thinking about the two reports together, how that plays out for you. We don't know. You're going to be your own podcast. Like, you're going to live out a life in a way that's going to be unique to you. Right. And so these are just merely some suggestions to kind of get you started, but you finish the story. You finished the story on this one. See, I'm playing to the empathy, emotional aspect.
This is good.
You finished the story.
These are just little sparks.
Like that 1,000 points of light. Jaclynn, anything else as we wrap this? Anything else you want to add?
Well, I just spoke of well-being, and we've talked about how self-care can be difficult for those with empathy. So maybe we extend a branch to our friends with empathy out there, because it's been, I imagine, quite a ride for those that have this high in the past 3 years, especially with everyone just feeling like they're on their own roller coaster ride with organizational change, with societal change, whatever it might be. So maybe I'd charge all of us with checking in on them and helping them to see what they might need from us this time.
Yeah. I like that. This question, how you doing? Like, how you really doing? Right.
How are
and
ya?
I know that's taken on a whole new meaning after this pandemic of thinking about, like, no, how are you really doing? I mean, that did so many things to remove just whatever was covering whatever was there, and we're just kind of seeing people in their raw form after all this stress, right? So those of you leading with empathy, you've got your hands full. Make sure you're taking care of yourself as well in this, but certainly your superpower is needed more than ever. Jaclynn, thanks for joining me today.
They're chicken soup for the soul.
That's right. Indeed. Well, with that, we'll remind everyone to take full advantage of all the resources we do have available now in Gallup Access. Head out to gallup.com/CliftonStrengths. Log in, go to the resources tab, upper left, go to resources, put in empathy in the resource. You'll see all the webcasts. If you like this one, we got 6 seasons of Theme Thursday and a whole season on well-being, plus everything we've written on it today. It's all out there. If you're a learner, you're going to want to head out there and write or input or any of the themes. Let's just be honest. Head out there and do that today. Stay up to date with all the webcasts by following us on Eventbrite, gallup.eventbrite.com. Create an account and hit follow. You'll get a notification whenever I put something new, like I did this morning. Join us on any social platform by searching Clifton Strengths, and we want to thank you for joining us today. If you liked it, regardless of where you're at, just hit the thumbs up or the like or plus or star or whatever it takes to get that done. And don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. Thanks for joining us today. If you're listening live, stay around for a little bit of post show. With that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.